In the endless blackness of space, where civilizations rose and fell like tides on distant shores, there existed a tradition older than most stars in the Federation. The Galactic Endurance Trials, held every cycle on the unforgiving world of Zorith Prime, a planet forged in fire and tempered by time. Twin suns scorched its surface by day, while freezing winds howled through the night. Jagged obsidian mountains pierced the sky, endless dunes shifted like living oceans, venomous jungles swallowed the careless, and rivers raged with the fury of 1,000 storms. This was no game. This was the ultimate measure of a species will to endure. For centuries, the greatest warriors, athletes, and survivors from across the galaxy came here to compete. The Vexari, insectoid beings with armored shells and hydraulic limbs that never tired. The Sylphids, ethereal creatures who floated on currents of pure thought. The Garathians, towering giants of muscle and stone-like skin. Each species brought their pride, their biology honed by evolution for survival. And each year, the trials claimed all but one. This cycle, something new had arrived. For the first time in recorded history, a human had entered. Earth was a young world in the Federation, barely accepted after centuries of observation. Their ships were slow, their technology crude by galactic standards. Humans were seen as fragile, emotional, short-lived curiosities. Soft skin, no natural armor, lungs that burned with effort. The overseers, ancient beings who administered the trials, barely hid their amusement when the human registered. His name was Alex Rivera, 32 years old, former trail runner from a small town in the Rocky Mountains. He stepped off the shuttle with a worn backpack, a water bottle, and a smile that didn't belong on Zorith Prime. "This looks fun," he said to the registration drone, as casually as if he were signing up for a local 10K. The Vexari Prime, a towering figure with mandibles that clicked in laughter, leaned forward on the observation platform. "The human will collapse before the first sun reaches zenith," it broadcast to the billions watching across the stars. "They are not built for this." As dawn broke, painting the sky in blood red and molten gold, 50 champions from 20 worlds stood at the base of the obsidian spire, the starting monolith of the endless loop. The rules were simple and brutal. Climb the spire, cross the dune sea, survive the thornwood jungle, ford the vortex river. Then do it again, and again. No aid stations. No rest beyond what your body allowed. The trial ended only when you yielded, or when you were the last one standing. The starting horn echoed like the voice of a dying god. They were off. The Vexari surged forward first, their claws digging into obsidian like machines. Garathians roared and charged, cracking stone beneath their feet. Sylphids rose on shimmering fields of energy, gliding upward. Alex adjusted his cap, took a deep breath, and began jogging toward the wall. He didn't sprint. He didn't panic. He just started climbing. Hours passed. The first to fall was a Falari scout, graceful, fast, but their lightweight frames overheated quickly in the rising suns. One slipped, tumbled, and yielded with a cry. Then a pair of reptilian Dracari, their scales cracking under the heat. By midday, 10 were gone. Alex was still climbing. Not leading. Not even close. He was near the back, moving steadily, breathing hard but controlled. Sweat poured down his face. His hands bled from the sharp rock. But he kept humming, some old Earth song about running through the rain. On the observation deck, commentators chittered in confusion. "He should have collapsed by now," said Lyriel, a Sylphid elder who had won the trials 3 cycles ago. "Humans overheat rapidly. Their muscles tear. Why does he continue?" The Vexari Prime clicked dismissively. "Stubbornness. Primitive instinct. He hasn't noticed how bad it is yet. He will." The lead pack crested the spire and began the descent into the dune sea, a desert so vast it had swallowed fleets. Temperatures soared past 50 degrees Celsius. Sandstorms whipped up without warning. The Vexari marched tirelessly. A Garathian named Korrig pounded forward, each step a small earthquake. Alex reached the top hours later, legs shaking. He sat for 30 seconds, the first real rest anyone had seen, drank from his bottle, and smiled at the view. "Beautiful planet," he muttered to himself. "Tough, but beautiful." Then he started down. Night fell. The first full cycle was complete for the leaders. 23 remained. Most collapsed into regenerative trances or entered low-power states. The Vexery stood motionless, recharging. Sylphids meditated in energy fields. Garathians simply slept like boulders. Alex found a small overhang, ate a compressed energy bar from his pack, allowed under the rules, as long as you carried it from the start, and lay down. He was asleep in minutes. The galaxy watched in stunned silence. "He sleeps?" whispered a commentator. After 14 hours of constant exertion, most species require neural stabilizers after 10. But Alex woke with the dawn, stretched, winced at his blisters, and started again. Day 2. The Dune Sea claimed 8 more. The heat, the thirst, the endless grind. Even the Vexery began to slow, their hydraulics overheating. Korg the Garathian roared in frustration as his massive body demanded more water than he could carry. Alex walked, not ran, walked. Steady pace. He sang sometimes. Old songs. Songs about home. About not giving up. He passed fallen champions who stared at him in disbelief. A young Vexery warrior, joints seizing, clicked weakly as Alex offered him a sip from his nearly empty bottle. "No aids allowed," the warrior rasped. "I'm not aiding," Alex said gently. "I'm just sharing. We're all out here together." The warrior refused, pride too strong. Alex nodded, capped the bottle, and kept walking. By the end of day 3, only 12 remained. The Thornwood jungle was next, a place where the air itself was poison, vines that lashed out with neurotoxins, predators that hunted by sound. Most species relied on natural resistance or tech implants. Humans had neither. Yet Alex moved carefully, methodically. He wrapped his bleeding hands in torn cloth. When a vine struck, he grunted in pain but kept moving. Antidotes weren't allowed. You endured or you yielded. He endured. On the 4th night, only 7 were left. Korg the Garathian, 3 Vexery, 2 Sylphids, and Alex. The galaxy was no longer laughing. Billions watched in silence as the human, bruised, blistered, limping, kept going. He hadn't taken a full rest in days. His eyes were bloodshot. His lips cracked. But he smiled when the suns rose. He still hadn't noticed. That was the phrase that began circulating across Federation networks. The human still hasn't noticed. Noticed what? That he should have quit days ago. That his body was breaking. That every other species had evolved past this kind of suffering. That what he was doing was impossible. On the 4th night, only 7 were left. Korg the Garathian, 3 Vexery, 2 Sylphids, and Alex. The galaxy was no longer laughing. Billions watched in silence as the human, bruised, blistered, limping, kept going. He hadn't taken a full rest in days. His eyes were bloodshot. His lips cracked. But he smiled when the suns rose. He still hadn't noticed. That was the phrase that began circulating across Federation networks. The human still hasn't noticed. Noticed what? That he should have quit days ago. That his body was breaking. That every other species had evolved past this kind of suffering. That what he was doing was impossible. On the 7th dawn, one Sylphid collapsed mid-flight, energy field flickering out. Only Lyriel and Alex were left. They stood at the base of the obsidian spire again, beginning what would be the final loop. Lyriel floated beside him, her form dimming with exhaustion. "Human," she said, voice soft over the wind. "Why do you continue? Your body is failing. You are in agony. Yield. Live." Alex looked at her, really looked. His face was gaunt, eyes sunken, but they still held that strange light. "Agony?" he asked, as if tasting the word. "Yeah, it hurts. A lot. But back home, we have this thing. We call it the wall. Runners hit it. You feel like you can't go on. Everything screams stop. But if you just keep going, sometimes you break through. And on the other side, that's when you find out who you really are." Lyriel stared. "You endure for self-discovery?" Alex chuckled weakly. "Nah, not really. I endure because the thought of quitting feels worse than the pain. Because someone back home is watching. Because I promised my little sister I'd come back with a story. Because giving up means letting the pain win. And I don't like losing to pain." He started climbing. Lyriel watched him go. She saw the way his hands shook. The way blood dripped from torn palms. The way each breath was a battle. And for the first time in her long life, she felt something she had no word for. She yielded. Not because her energy failed, but because she realized she had already lost. Alex reached the top of the spire alone. He didn't cheer, didn't collapse. He just sat, looked out over the brutal, beautiful world, and whispered, Wow, that was a good one. The horn did not sound. There was no one left to challenge him. The trial was over. Across the galaxy, silence fell. Then, slowly, something shifted. Vexari lowered their mandibles in respect. Garathians bowed their massive heads. Sylphids dimmed their lights in solemn awe. The human hadn't won through strength. He hadn't won through speed or endurance born of biology. He had won because he refused to accept that the pain meant it was over. Because humans, fragile, soft, short-lived humans, had evolved something no other species possessed in quite the same way. A stubborn, ridiculous, beautiful refusal to quit. Not because they didn't feel the pain, but because they decided the story wasn't finished yet. The Vexari Prime approached Alex as Medrones finally descended. The human was barely conscious, smiling through cracked lips. "You," the Prime clicked softly, "did not notice when you should have stopped." Alex laughed, a dry, rasping sound. "Yeah? When was that?" The Prime had no answer. As Alex was carried away on a stretcher, the galaxy watched a species once dismissed as weak and felt something profound. For the first time, the galaxy understood what it truly meant to be human. Not unbreakable bodies, but unbreakable will. Not the absence of pain, but the choice to keep going anyway. And in that moment, humanity didn't just win a trial. They changed the stars forever. If this story moved you, subscribe for more human stories from the stars. Milky Way.